Okay, welcome to the World Beyond Belief. My name's Paul Marco, and we're deep into looking at targeted individuals and gang stalking and energy weapons. And if you've been watching this channel, you know we do a weekly broadcast on this topic. But the reason that we got into this, and the what can I say, the saint who got us into this and leads us through this has been Dr. Eric Karlstrom. If you look on our channel, his videos are the most watched. He's an expert on this subject, and he's a brilliant lecturer. So I'd like to welcome back to the World Beyond Belief. He's going to talk about the militarization of police and police state America and how we got here. So welcome to the World Beyond Belief, Dr. Eric Karlstrom.
Well, thank you, Dr. Paul Marco. It's great to be back and to talk to you. And I know you've been busy with your fora with some very distinguished people on this topic. And so, wow, you're deep into it too. And it'll be good to compare our notes and our perspectives on this because we're all learning. Most TIs probably in the world still don't know what's going on to them. They know that their lives are being turned upside down, they're being harassed, they're being humiliated, they're being hurt in a very, very concerted and deliberate way. But they have no clue where it's coming from or why. So we're all struggling to put the pieces together on this thing. So, yeah, I think that we need to keep delving into the roots of this thing to understand it. And I think the more people understand it, the better chance they are going to have to survive it. And we fortunately have the benefit of the internet and these podcasts and information, Google searches, etc. So this is our best defense, information. And your World Beyond Belief series is, certainly top notch in this regard, and I'm sure has helped and is helping many. It's very confusing. We get lots of contacts, I'm sure you do too, contact from people claiming to be TIs, and many of them probably are. You don't know exactly who's who in this world because we're dealing with a world of deception, military deception. And once we start looking into as we've done more recently, the contribution of the military and police and the interagency to this global program. Well, it's their program, and of course, the U.S. military and intelligence agencies work for the U.S. government, which of course works for and is now merged with the corporatocracy. So the lines of power we've talked about, but we're still trying to understand the details and put forth some possible solutions.
Yeah, you can't give up, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to start, if I could, Paul, with Ike's farewell address. You and I both lived through the 60s, which was an extremely tumultuous decade. That was our growing up period. And wake up period in the same time. A lot of psychological operations were going on, as it turns out. We now know, we didn't then, because it was like the water we were swimming in. We were like fish in a fishbowl, and we didn't know what was a psychological operation. We didn't know what that was. But anyway, Ike in his 1961 farewell address to the nation, this is five-star General President Eisenhower, said, "Beware of the military-industrial complex." And, well, it turns out that during the Cold War, roughly between the end of World War II and 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down and the Cold War officially stopped, the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, consumed $9 trillion of American taxpayer resources, which is more than all the other sectors of the economy put together. Okay, so how did they do this? Well, they did it with this boogeyman, communism, anti-communism. We have to go protect the world from communists. And J. Edgar Hoover's role as head of the FBI was always to deport communists out of the United States so they could use that against internal enemies. He's a communist. Let's get him out of here. Paul Robeson, he's a communist. sent him to, he goes to Russia. And all he was a great black singer, And of course, J. Edgar Hoover hated blacks. It was and then of course all the other nationalistic movements around the world, such as Arbenz coming to little power in Guatemala in 1954, was deposed by the CIA because he wanted to get a little land from the United Fruit Company, owned by Allen Dulles and his buddies, back to the dirt poor peasants. And of course, then Allen Dulles of the CIA, and it's a familiar story to a lot of people, but most people don't know it. Anyway, I mean, Arbenz was a nationalist, but the label communist was used. Arbenz wasn't interested in communism. Neither was Mossadegh, the leader of Iran, who was by Kermit Roosevelt, who was a CIA operative with $1 million related to Teddy Roosevelt, who went ahead and destabilized that country, got Mossadegh out of the office. And there have been almost countless examples of these kinds of destabilization programs by the CIA and their associates, their minions. Now you have to talk almost in terms of the CIA DOD. Two-thirds of the intelligence operations in the world are funded through DOD. And, what happened when the wall came down was now these guys need a new boogeyman, right? They've got to figure out how to keep the bucks flowing. And, of course, terrorism has come along as the substitute. So now the war on terror, the global war on terror, is the new catch-all basket. He's a terrorist. This is a terrorist nation. This is a terrorist group, blah, blah, blah. And now our military doctrine has shifted generation war. Few documents going back to the 90s or 80s even, and going right up to the present. The military is ready to fight against individuals and groups. War is not confined to nations anymore. War is out amongst the people. It's in your country. The battle space is in your neighborhood. Okay, so we have all these military people ganged up with the police now through the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security fusion centers. What they're doing is they're going through massive amounts of data that's provided by NSA on every aspect of Americans' lives that are being surveilled, the metadata, of everything about your health records and about your buying history and about your IRS records, etc. And if they find somebody that they think might be a problem to the national security, which is another huge blanket term like terrorism, which is completely fraudulent because it really is just protecting the power structure and not protecting the nation whatsoever. But if they find somebody that they think they don't like, then they'll have an analyst go in there and look through the data, and then they can annotate the data, put a little checkpoint next to this, and then they send it to another analyst. And there's 76 fusion centers now in the United States, and something like $60 billion a year coming into the Department of Homeland Security. And they're throwing out billions of dollars of grants to local police departments, et cetera, and local community groups to set up this civilian military spy phenom around system, which is actually doing, of course, the gang stalking. Right. So, we have this secret army. And what got me onto this idea was I get on these lists of emails, and some of them are pretty insightful. And one of the YouTubes that was given to me, or was shared on one of the emails, was of a journalist, George Webb. And I'd like to just make his last point. And in fact, the person who wrote me the email said, "Hey, I haven't heard of this idea before. You think this is true?" And basically what George Webb says is, okay, this gang stalking is an old program, going back to COINTELPRO of the FBI, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and going back to the CIA's MK Ultra and then MH Chaos, in which they spied on Americans during the Vietnam War because they were worried about the Vietnam Syndrome. Okay, the Vietnam Syndrome is when the people don't get on board for empire and colonialism around the world. And hamper and hinder the attempts of the military-industrial complex to go out and conquer the world, and which, of course, is what's been happening all our lives, Paul. And America has become the empire, the biggest and greatest in history, of course. And so he's saying this is an old program, but actually, he says now there's 2 million people on the terrorism watch list that the DHS has, but you can't find out if you're on the list because it's a state secret. Okay, so, and then he says, hey, but don't feel too bad if you're a TI because this isn't personal. What this really is, this is a training exercise for a secret CIA standing army to intervene in the case of an insurrection or a civil disturbance. Well, if you start looking into the literature, and I've got quite a bit of literature. I buy books and I read them. And here's a book from 2002, edited by Tom Burkhart, Police State America, U.S. Military Civil Disturbance Planning. Okay, so in this book, written by multiple authors, it's a small book. I really recommend that every TI or person who, now we call them heroes, right? Highly evolved, what is it? We're changing our acronyms. Now TI stands Truth Insister or Truth Interrogator or Truth Investigator. Right. So we've got to redefine this thing because all the terms are coming to us from these people, from the PSYOP people in the military or in the corporate sector. Now, I've got books now, Spies for Hire. Tim Chirac, 70% of the budget of the intelligence, you can call it the intelligence industrial complex, goes to private contractors. And many of these private contractors then will be headed up by ex-CIA, FBI, ex-FBI, and ex-NSA people through the revolving door from the government where they're trained to get more lucrative jobs in the private sector. And then they actually continue in the most sensitive areas of this, intelligence network, including all the black prisons that the CIA operates throughout the world, like Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo, Gitmo, and 25, 30 more. They're detention centers, they call them. Well, these are torture centers. Let's face it, and the U.S. tax dollars are paying for it. Gee, at some point, do you think the American people might say, did we ever vote to take over the world? Did we ever vote to torture Iraqis and have our agents sodomize Iraqi boys and then send the video clips back to President Bush and Dick Cheney, who apparently get off on this kind of thing, live, real-time show for these guys? This is our tax dollars. This is America. This is America's face to the world. Right. If you start to dig in, and I speak to people, I've been down here in Mexico, I meet Americans. I spoke to some young women, middle-aged women who were realtors from San Diego, mother from Guatemala, father from Germany, probably, and NASA, probably, Nazi. But anyway, I told them about the Guatemalan coup, 1954. They didn't know about it. I talked to a realtor here about the attempt to create a North American Union between Canada, United States, and Mexico in 2005. It was a secret attempt by our president, Vicente Fox, the president of Mexico, and the prime minister of Canada. He didn't know about it. Americans have become so ignorant because we watch football, we read the newspaper, which is, a psyop itself, it's propaganda, as is the news. So there is this parallel history, which is the real history, which you can only get by digging. You can only get if you wake up. You can only get if you work. You can only get if you take your responsibility as a citizen seriously. Right. Something's got to click over, and you have to say, "Wait a minute, this is my country. This is my world." And anyway, so I digressed a little bit. Yeah. So all these secret aspects of our clandestine services, and there's 16 of them in the U.S. government, 16 intelligence services. The CIA is the one that does most of the covert ops overseas, and but they all do covert ops now, I think, in the United States. I think this whole gang stalking is a gigantic covert op. It's a worldwide covert op. And it's our job, Paul, to expose and defeat it, which was the title of one of our earlier discussions. It's a battle. It's an information war. It's a battle for legitimacy. The only reason they can get away with this is if the American people perceive that these authority figures who, like, say they have a badge, I'm FBI, and is under suspicion for blah, blah, blah. We can't arrest him yet. We don't have enough evidence. Would you please help us, blah, 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 do this. Or, here, just sign up as a surveillance role player, perp, and get money. Get your phone app, go out there,
right.
And it's like a game for these people. It's like Pokemon Go. You get your orders. Okay, walk in front of this person. That's it. All you have to do is walk in front of this person. You get $15, $20 an hour. Okay, they say all the world's a stage. All the men and women are merely players. Well, we got a lot of actors out there now who are being paid to play these destructive roles. They don't know the extent to which they're destroying people. They don't know the extent of bad karma they're taking on to themselves. They know they're getting some money, and we have a lot of underemployed people. But this system is just so profoundly and fundamentally evil that it must be exposed, and these people must be called out. I mean, all the world's a stage means, it's all the same. It's not all the same. You do this kind of thing, in my present worldview, you're going to hell. That's eternal consequences. That's payback. That's
right.
You're putting people in hell. Hey, you're going to go to hell if you're doing it deliberately,
right,
unrepentantly, consistently.
Right.
This is the nature of the universe we live in,
right.
And these people are useful idiots, as Lenin used that term, in a system that they don't understand. So, my thinking, is maybe we can discuss how this system might be growing out of the world that we knew or thought we knew in the 1960s, where the Democratic Convention was heavily, in Chicago, 1968, was heavily infiltrated by military intelligence operatives. And Paul, I remember watching that on TV at my parents' house. I was, just a college student, and there was a debate between Gore Vidal and William Buckley, the commentator, the conservative
right.
commentator, who himself had worked with the CIA. And I was ready to hit through the roof. It was, Buckley was so full of it. And Gore Vidal was the guy who was scoring all the truthful points in that debate. But what was going on was complete chaos. And it was the overthrow, really, of a political process by the... This is how the elite take over, through overthrows or coups and infiltration. And so the 1968, the whole 60s, I mean, we can go through it. You and I, right. We can talk about these things. But so my, what I was hoping we could talk about today is the email that I got from this other quote-unquote TI, we'll say truth investigator, saying, hey, is there any credibility or possibility that this guy's right, that what's being formed here is a secret CIA standing army? Who are these people then who are the perps who are in a command and control system, which is now driven by the military with their fourth generation warfare structure. So you now have these mobile command centers, these C4ISR, command control computer communications, or command control communications computer, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, who are bouncing information off of satellites and who are accumulating data in real time, and who know tracking every individual that is in the system and then putting people on them to harass them based on psychological protocols that have been developed for those people that are designed to degrade them, as in the Zurzik song of the East German Stasi, decomposition. We're going to do these. It's no touch torture. We're going to do these actions. It's a death of 1,000 cuts. These actions are designed to break the will, to deny, to destroy, and all these words are used in the documents, is a military operation, but it's a new kind of military operation. We're not going to kill the person outright. It's a long war. It's going to be a slow attrition. And this is what they did in the Phoenix program in Vietnam against the civilian infrastructure there that supported the Viet Cong, or said they did. And so again, this is coming out of these CIA operations. Now it's global. And we have apparently this global standing army, which has been formulated. It's another secret army that can be used to quell any possible resistance of the population to this corporate New World Order, which is of course colonialism, imperialism, world takeover by the extremely rich, by the psychopaths that you've talked about. Right. So this becomes then one more very effective military, it's civil military. It's a conglomeration of things. It's the interagency in America. It's the multinational force in everywhere else. That's what it's called in the U.S. military documents. But this is apparently deliberate. Now we have the Air Force, we have the Marines, we have all these military forces, the National Guard, plus we have the civil military army to descend upon and suppress any possible dissent. And I'm suspecting that what's going on with people like me, I was a university professor for 30 years. I'm not a violent person. I've got no crimes. I've never been in jail. My crimes are things like, traffic tickets. Yeah. So, but I could be defined as a potential terrorist threat because my ideas against globalization, for instance, that I've written about, my ideas about 911 being an inside job, my ideas about global warming being another fraud, that, the capacity against these wars is threatening to the system. So I can be put on this terrorist list, as I suspect that I have, and therefore they can go after people like me. So this is quite a beast we're up against here, I think. Right. This is what I'm coming to. And I'm going to throw it back to you, Paul. I'm sure you have several comments after all that.
Well, I think it's important that we as old folks fill in the history that's been missing. The millenniums and the people that are be born even after the millenniums have no historical reference. I don't think they teach it in the schools at all. And so when we talk about 1968 and the Chicago 7 and Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley, who's a skull and bones guy,
yes.
They have no idea what was leading up to this. So I think it's important that we sketch in a lot that was going on, how the Phoenix program was started in Vietnam and used over there to subjugate the people through terror. It was an absolute terror mechanism. And what they've done, they've just expanded it to take into the whole world. And, you may be on the watch list because you're a great researcher and very articulate, and you could present a problem to them. But I know people that are art teachers that are on the list. I mean, it could be anybody that they decide that they want to experiment on or put in the program because, maybe they have too many perps in that area and they need extra help. But I like what you're going. I like how you're starting with the 60s and rolling this thing out. Is that what George Webb's information led you to?
Yes. Yeah. This email from one of the other TIs, Truth Investigator, included a link to this YouTube interview of George Webb. He's done many, and I think he's a solid journalist with good intention and a lot of good information. And he said on there that, hey, don't take it personal, TIs, if you're an art teacher. It's not that they don't like you. It's just that they need to have, you out there so that they can do this training exercise for this secret standing army. And I thought about that for a minute, when I saw the email, and I said, gee, I don't know if that's true or not. And then I just delved into my own book here, again, the same ones, Police State America, looking back into the military documents and records and laws and stuff that came out of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And of course it's true. There's an enormous militarization of the police that's happened in order to suppress these quote-unquote civil disturbances. And, let's talk about the 60s. Okay, look at all the riots that happened. There were 19 riots simultaneously in 19 cities after the assassination of Martin Luther King in 1968 in April. And the military had 21,000 of its troops ready to intervene. Okay, even by 1968, the military had already imposed itself on the police structure in America in order to maintain order. And now, of course, it would be 2 or 3 shows to talk about all of the crazy things that happened in the 60s, but right in the middle 60s, there were all these riots in the black ghettos and burning big parts of the city. And, there was an enormous issue of police brutality, white against black. And I now look back on this and think this must have been fabricated. In other words, this was instigated. This was deliberate in order to create chaos. Because, what we're trying to do is destabilize. That's the whole mission of the CIA, is to destabilize every country. So I think that these and what we see then is, the CIA and the intelligence operations in Laurel Canyon, where the sons and daughters of the military-industrial complex were the rock stars. Well, right. This was then to create a false opposition to the Vietnam War. In other words, to discredit the real opposition to the Vietnam War by painting the hippies as being crazy, stoned, right. Rock and roll nuts, And Middle America then would reject the whole generation. So we had effectively a war between the generations. Well, you talk about divide and conquer. This is very effective. Back, it was just about a civil war back in the 60s. And, the long hairs against the short hairs and that sort of thing. And we see the same kind of infiltration and manipulation, say, in the Battle of Seattle, 1999, when you had this coalition of environmental groups and social justice groups protesting the World Trade Organization in 1999. And it was a peaceful demonstration, except the Black Bloc. The whole thing was infiltrated by these people in black clothes who went around, breaking windows and stealing TV sets and burning things. Well, the Black Bloc, as it turns out, was making money, and they were housed in downtown Seattle. Right. Their housing was paid for by the powers that be in order to discredit this this protest. In other words, so they hate dissidents, they hate dissent. And you've done programs on the Jade Helm. And you know about Jade Helm 2015 military exercises, civil military exercises, and then the unconventional warfare exercises 2016 involving 8 states in America. Who are they going after? They're going after dissidents. And you can make money then by playing the role of a guerrilla leader. This is your surveillance role player. Your role is to be a guerrilla revolutionary leader. And now the war game, and they love war games and drills, is to, take you out. Well, obviously they're preparing for a big insurrection. Right. Obviously they're preparing for the clampdown of martial law. And we saw, when we talked about all the drills going on 9/11, which is one of our programs on World Beyond Belief, Webster Tarpley, the historian, the economic historian, identified 46 military drills going on the day of 9/11, 2001, and leading up to it, which mimicked every aspect of the quote-unquote terror event, state-sponsored false flag, synthetic terror event, which was 9/11, then provides the justification for this gigantic ramping up of the global war on terror at home and abroad. Okay, so now terrorism is the boogeyman, and it's all a fraud, because the terrorists in Washington, D.C. Now, Okay, so the whole thing is kind of like a gigantic house of cards. Now you have this huge national security establishment that's making billions of dollars. The richest communities in the country, Arlington, Virginia, where I grew up, Fairfax, Virginia, Spook Central, Loudoun, Virginia. These people, these are magnets for very intelligent people who go and work in these intelligence agencies and make a lot of money and do this kind of stuff. And the enemy, of course, is everybody now. It's the people. And yes, if you're an art teacher and you're put on one of these lists, your life goes to crap. And you're part of maybe, apparently, a training exercise for this secret army.
Fantastic.
That's the new concept here.
Well, I wanted to do a podcast on that, and we can mend this together. You're on fire, by the way, Eric. If I had a professor like you in college, I would probably stayed awake the whole time. I mean,
well, I wasn't on fire all the time, I'll tell you.
No,
we have something at stake here. I personally do, since I seem to be one of these people on the list, one of these truth investigators on the list.
Absolutely, we are. And here's the difference. This war is the same as all the other wars, all down through history. It's the people against the elite power. I think they're satanic. It's the people against the satanic elite. And that's the way it's been. That's the way it was in World War II, when they got the Nazis fighting with the communists, fighting with the U.S. Chamberlain wanted to make peace with Germany, but the Queen heard that and got him out of there and put Winston Churchill in there. We don't want peace. That's the idea. We want war. We want them fighting one another. Now we're in the same thing. We've got, they think they're fighting, is China a threat? Is North Korea a threat? Come on. Jeez, what's it?
Yeah, they hate to.
Is it the size of Rhode Island? I don't know how big that country is, but it certainly couldn't be as. What do we have? We have our military budget is more than the combined military budget of all the other countries, and we're frightened of North Korea. It's all baloney. The idea is it's us against them, and what we see in this war that's going on with the TIs, the surveillance, the mind control, is them against us coming out. And the sooner we realize it's us against them, the sooner we can look back at what they've been doing. And I think this podcast is a great historical reference at how they've been warring on us since World War II. That's my reference. And how they orchestrated in the 60s. In the 60s, according to a way of measuring time called the saculum, we go through an awakening time. And everybody during that time, union members, old people, everybody wanted out of Vietnam. We all wanted civil rights. That's just what was in us. That was a meme that was growing up. So to fight the meme, what does the elite do? They divide the young people from the old people using a method called the Aquarian conspiracy, where they made us into hippie, dope smoking. That's a throwback from the 60s.
That's right.
You
can't explain the 60s to somebody who didn't live through it. I mean, it was very, very, very chaotic. It was like going through a blender, and turn it on high. And see what and scramble that north arrow that people might have internally. You don't know which way you're pointed when you come out.
No, and we were coming off of Leave It to Beaver. We were coming right out of Leave It to Beaver into this craziness, the hippie movement, and then you mentioned the Chicago 7. That craziness. That's the first time we'd ever seen anything like that. It was like the whole world was falling apart after the Kennedy assassination, and. But it was all staged. It was all staged, exactly like the War on Terror, exactly like 9/11, exactly like what's going on today. And we have to remember so we know what side we're on. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and if we want to look at the historical aspect of this, we can go back to Plato and his Plato's Republic. Yeah. He says, in every city there are two cities, and they're at war with each other. One is rich and one is poor. And so, this perpetual war between the elite and their minions, because the elite print money out of thin air. Yeah. They own the money. They own the whole economy. And their many, many, many minions. I remember when I was teaching human ecology at California State University, Stanislaus, and I'm sure this is one of the many things that could have gotten me on the list. I mean, I started out first 10 years, talking about, all the terrible environmental problems, and we're all going to die. And then after 10 years, I realized that the right-wing critique of the environmental movement was more correct. Actually, the biggest polluters are corporations and the military and the government. And most of the, we're going to die stuff is nonsense, including, of course, global warming. And but I would show a video, an excellent video called "Who's Globalization" by a guy named Kevin Danaher of Global Exchange in San Francisco. Kevin Danaher happened to have a PhD in political science, and he was a very fiery lecturer. And he would say, and again, who's globalization? Is globalization for the elite or is it for the people? And he'd say everybody with access to a college education is automatically in a contradictory class position. They can decide to serve the elite, or they can try to serve the people. Well, hey, I made my choice a long time ago. I'm not interested in serving the elite. These are pedophiles. These are crazy people. These are greedy, as you say, Satanists. Get right down to it. You have to say they're Satanists. So, if you have the brains and the desire to, go on through, get an education, there is another option, and that is to serve your fellow man. Now, that's hard because your fellow man often doesn't have the same bucks as the elite right. does, but so you have to be clever. But yeah, this is the battle. This is the battle. And so to understand that this gang stalking thing is part of this larger sweep and is one of many, many programs that has to do with the power structure protecting itself from the people to take the people out, to neutralize the people, to degrade the people, to make sure that, it's a preventative kind of thing now. It can be used as a preventative. Make sure Dr. Karlstrom doesn't have much influence, so let's make sure that his efforts don't go anywhere. Let's discredit him. Let's defame him. Let's, degrade him. Let's decompose him, as the Zerset word means in the Stasi lexicon. This is what's applied now to American civilians who are unlucky enough to be put on these lists, as well as people from all around the world, and they don't know what's going on. But apparently, again, you have these mobile command and control centers. We have these tactical PSYOP teams moving around the world, with highly qualified people who are interested then in devoting government resources to neutralizing individuals and groups. This is the enemy now. The enemy is everywhere. The enemy is nowhere. We decide who the enemy is. Right. The enemy is the guys on this list, and that's exactly what happened in the Phoenix program in Vietnam. The CIA give a list, to the military and say, okay, take these guys out. And this is what happens in every country that the CIA takes over, destabilizes. They get rid of the intelligentsia. They get rid of the good people. They get rid of the union organizers. They get rid of, they'll go back to Chile, 1973 coup, which was a, CIA operation for sure. Came right out of the Chicago School of Economics, too, with Milton Friedman. We're going to, terrorize the people. We're going to get rid of the democratically elected Jacobo Arbenz, who wanted to make some democratic reforms. And we're going to put in our military police state dictator, what's his name?
I always think of the Madonna.
That's Perón.
Yeah.
But this guy, anyway, Arbenz, and who's the guy? Anyway, it'll come to me. But it put in our military dictator, and then 30,000 good people disappear. And where do they go? Nobody knows. You lost your relative. They're off the map. And it turns out many of these people would go to some of these cults that the CIA was running in Argentina, like it's just, Children of God or something, with a German pedophile running it.
Right.
This is a network. This is a huge network. And the military-industrial complex got its tentacles into this satanic pedophile network and vice versa. There's this long association, I think, between the top people in our government and military, etc., and this secret society satanic network, which goes back thousands of years and certainly wants to take over the world. You can make the claim that it wants to take over the world for Satan. And I think that's fairly obvious. But right. Because, if you cut that deal, you get everything, as like Jesus was offered the deal out there in the, on the rock in the desert after 40 days of, not eating. And the devil says, bow down and worship me, and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. And he's sitting away, but there's a large group of people who have taken him up on that deal. And of course, then the payback is, you work for Satan and you go to hell, for eternity. So lousy deal as far as I'm concerned. But apparently,
yeah, it's a very lousy deal because nobody's ever happy with it. I mean, you get what you want, but it's not what you want. Helping other people, their service to others, that's what you want, and that's what's going to give you happiness. Service to yourself will never give you happiness. Well, I'm lecturing, but I think it's a big mistake to think that wealth and fame is what you want, because you're not going to be happy with it.
And it's going to come, I think, with a lot of strings attached.
I think it does.
Words, yes, you can be president, but we're going to tell you what you're going to say and do.
That's right.
And hire this guy to do this, and you go here and you go there, and you say this, and so you're controlled.
Yeah,
heavily controlled.
And you have to take part in these rituals, and from what I've seen, they're anything but pleasant. There's a movie called Bedazzled, and it's a lightweight movie with Brendan Fraser and Elizabeth Hurley. And she's gorgeous, and she makes the perfect devil, and she is deeply satanic. But it's interesting because every time she grants Brendan Fraser a wish, I think it's on YouTube. Every time she grants Brendan Fraser a wish, it's not what he wants. It's, something's wrong, and I think that's what you're going to find. So knowing that you're on the right side, doing the right thing is where you want to be, even though we do get kicked around and we do get deceived constantly. Even in this podcast business, let alone being an individual like yourself who is spied on all the time.
Yeah, part of this being, a target, quote unquote, is, or the part of the, you're somebody else's training exercise is, they're running all these little setups, all these little games on you, which again are designed by psychological operations teams to send you messages which are designed to, deflate and degrade and humiliate and to wear you down, and so that eventually you'll give up. You'll give up doing anything. You'll go out of your house, that's what they want, or you'll kill yourself.
Right.
But they, a success for them would be you kill yourself. See, this is a new kind of warfare. In the old warfare, they just killed you.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit more like 1984. Where, Winston Smith, who is, in the Department of the Ministry of Truth. Everybody should read this book if they haven't already twice. And Winston Smith noticed that, the ruling elite is having him, rewrite the history to suit their present needs. And he's constantly rewriting the past. And he's got just a little bit of an independent streak. He finds this woman attractive. But no, sex is not, appropriate in this highly controlled Big Brother world. And so he gets, the treatment from O'Brien, who's now torturing him in a room, and asking him what's 2 and 2. And he says 4 and zap, Yeah. And then he says, okay, now what's 2 and 2, And he said, well, anything you want, please stop, torturing me. And so in the story, he becomes to love his torturer, O'Brien. he is broken. He's a broken man. He's sitting out there in the back in a nice little coffee shop, drinking his coffee by himself. And he's been broken. He loves Big Brother now. This is the end of the book. That's the last line. Now he loves Big Brother. And then, of course, they kill him. So what they want to do is they want to destroy your body, your mind, and your soul first. They want to bring you to hell. And then they don't really care, whether you live or die, because they've got you. They got your body and your mind and your soul. This is very satanic. Now, I want to throw out another idea here, Paul, and again, now this is real conjecture. I think, we have some fairly, solid ground to be making the correlations we've been making so far, that this actually might be a way to train this secret army to mobilize this new command and control structure that's going to involve civilians and the private sector and NGOs and vigilantes, etc. Well, I've read the work of Russ Dizdar, who's a Christian author, wrote Black Awakening, and he's been working since the 80s with satanic cults. And he believes, based on his work, he's been working to try to, stamp out Satanism. I mean, pretty hard to do. But he's actually been an advisor with police departments to help them to deal with this phenomenon, because Satanism has been a big phenomenon underground. Doesn't get much press because the media is highly controlled. But anyway, Russ Dizdar wrote this book, Black Awakening, in which he thinks there are 10 million satanic super soldiers in America now, or 20 years ago, or whatever, and 100 million in the world, and that these people would have been victims of, say, the MK Ultra and other government programs in which their minds have been fragmented, intentionally so, and alter egos have been installed, alter identities, even demons and animal spirits, and then these people then can be used as Manchurian candidates, somebody who would be flipped into another identity, and then would be given the orders, communicated with, given the orders to go shoot somebody, and then flip back into their other alter personality. Amnesia barriers would have been placed between the different personalities in the personality structure, which is quite elaborate apparently. And this person then could be used to carry out, government missions, much like the Bourne Identity series movies. But the difference is Bourne Identity, the storyline, he volunteers. This guy played by Matt Damon volunteers to do this. But these people were in fact abused before they were 6 and raped. So they're volunteers. I mean, they are victims totally of this system, which goes right to the Illuminati and back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but was perfected under the CIA's MK Ultra and the Nazi experiments, and to a lesser extent all the British psychiatry which preceded that, going back to the Tavistock Institute. Okay, so the scenario that I'm suggesting is that many, and I don't know what percentage, this is simply speculation, many of the perps may in fact be amongst these potentially millions of people who have been fragmented, who are what Russ Dizdar calls satanic super soldiers, and that they are being kind of organized in this system to be used again at a later date when they are needed for other operations. Now, this is really a dark scenario, but I believe we're living on one planet, and there's one reality, basically, the truth. And the truth is that if there's 10 million people out there who are fragmented as satanic super soldiers, and the government has a lot to do with that process, and the government has a lot to do with this process of gang stalking, perhaps there's an overlap here that we don't see. This is speculation.
Oh, well, I think it's right on target. I've done work with programs that trace the satanic involvement. I think the reason that they torture isn't to get information. It's a satanic ritual that they're doing. They're pleasing their God by torturing people, because it's been shown in a lot of studies that You can get a lot better information by befriending them, building common ground, and getting them to go see your point of view than you can with torture. Torture doesn't work in terms of interrogation. Torture works to serve the satanic masters. That's why people like Trump, oh, we're going to do torture and we're going to do even more torture. Well, great. We know what side he's on. He worships Apollo. You know, I'm happy that you're doing this now, because this is a breakthrough, because we were raised in a culture that wasn't language to deal with this. I mean, we were taught to dismiss Christianity when we were teenagers, because they're going to tie down our ability to have fun, and they're prudish, and my God, and then all the language that goes with languaging the situation that we're in. Satan, demons, possession, all this language isn't in our lexicon. So we have to relearn things as we're coming into a reality that can be only languaged this way, I think. And certainly the satanic overlords are going to design a human system modeled after the satanic system. There's demon possession. Now we have TIs. Well, I have a woman that I work with every week, and she has a man in her head. His name's Randy Weber. And he talks to her, and he won't let her do things. He changes her dreams. It's technologically done, but it's demonic possession. So what the Satanists have done is they've kind of delegated their haunting, their devilnishness to technology now. So now we've got perfected techniques to irritate someone. We have soldiers that are dressed in electronic gear, so much so that they're mind controlled when they're in this gear. We have legions of mind control people. These Satanists have been working for years. That what they do is they molest people under 6. And this causes their brain to fragment so that they can accommodate other personalities. And one is always made to accommodate demons. So this is the world we live in. I don't like it. But unless we wake up and language it and realize it, I think we're defenseless. So
yeah, a turning point for me, Paul, was in 2012 when I more or less dedicated the whole year to researching an article called the Mind Control History and Applications. That is about 60, 70 pages, single-spaced, very, very heavily referenced, which talks about these things. It talks about the history of the MK Ultra program and coming from the Nazis, etc. And any exposure to this kind of mind control, you realize the connection between mind control and Satanism is profound. And I made the analogy back then. It was like spending a year in the ninth circle of hell, even to come to grips with these realities. And this is what our government was spending money on back in the 50s and 60s, among other things. I mean, just think. The CIA, now I'm shifting gears a little bit, part of the MK Ultra was to test the chemical and the biological and electronic and hypnotic and every possible means of mind control from a scientific viewpoint. 148 sub-projects, and MK Ultra was just one of many operations and programs on mind control. I could go into that, but we'll use it as a blanket term. Just think, they studied LSD, this hallucinogenic, very powerful hallucinogen, for something like 12 or 15 years, concluded that it was a psychosis-producing war weapon before they dumped it on our generation, Paul.
Right.
And they sent their agents into San Francisco to cook up, to pass it out. And, of course, they didn't know what they were dealing with at first. And, people from all over the government were trying it out and, with all kinds of crazy mixed results. But once they had figured out, yes, it's psychosis producing and it's a war weapon, and that's what they wanted to find out, then it was unleashed on the American people. So know, I mean, my mind boggles at this. Who's making these decisions?
Right.
And as you say, it has to be connected to a satanic superstructure. In other words, now you have all these levels, highly compartmented organizations. I'm sure a lot of good people in the FBI, CIA, NSA, and all these organizations who go in there for good reasons. But you're part of a bad system, and pretty soon you're going to be asked to do this and that and the other, which is very compromising, and you have to decide whether you want to continue, getting your work and doing your work and getting your salary and getting your retirement, or whether you're just going to, go, work at McDonald's or whatever. And I think that a lot of these people are compromised along the way. But that's a vast subject. But the system's very, very dark. And this mind control thing, which of course is a big part of the gang stalking, and apparently now as part of the whole structure, including the communique methods between the local commanders at these C4 ISR stations, which are mobile or virtual or fixed, can be in your hometown, could be in your neighborhood, in which they have access to the whereabouts of every single TI and what they're doing at all times, 24/7, and it's their job. They're getting paid to. Well, I guess Catherine Horton used the word. They're professional fuckwithers. They're fucking with you. They're messing you up.
That's right.
That's what they're doing, and our government is paying them to do it. This is beyond the pale. This is beyond any. This has got to come out, and the United States people have to say. Now, George Webb in this interview was asked, what can we do about it? He said, well, what can Trump do about it? He can expose those 650,000 emails of Hillary, which show the extent of these very, very dark operations, these intelligence operations, that everything's basically a lie, as
right.
we've been discovering, right. And that this is how the elite manipulate us through these operations and through these lies.
But Trump would get caught because he's got all kind of reservations and past history with the Lolita Express and our man Jeffrey Epstein down there. So he wouldn't be given that position if he wasn't compromised. I mean,
very good point.
I hate to say that, but that's true. And,
yeah.
And we should say we're in the middle of Beltane now. This is a satanic ritual time of the year when up until 2 days ago, up until 3 days ago, they were gathering captives, young children and women, and on the 25th they started ritually sacrificing them, and they'll do that all the way to May, sometime in the beginning of May. That's how they roll. That's what they're doing, and you can believe that the satanic masters at the top of this are involved, just like they're involved in Bohemian Grove and the cremation of care ceremony, where children are ritually sacrificed. Of course, if you hear someone say that, they'll say, well, they do a mock sacrifice. These are the richest people in the world, and it's a ritual to gain them financial independence and wealth, and they're certainly not going to do it with Barbie dolls. Believe me, they're going to do it with real people. This is what we're dealing with. Pizzagate isn't a sham. Pizzagate, there's so many connections, there's so many people that should be at least under investigation. I'm surprised that they were able to get away without investigating any of those psychopaths that are involved in that. Let me ask you a question, Eric. Do you think that if the stuff came out on Pizzagate in the 1950s, that people would actually mobilize and do something about it, or do you think we were subdued enough even back then to sit and wait for just an opinion?
Oh wow! Of course, 50s is when we're kids.
Yeah, we were
I was
kids.
a kid in the 50s, so it was a fairly idyllic world, at least from a kid's viewpoint. I mean, we were playing in the parks, and the parents were getting together with other families with other kids and doing picnics on Sunday or going drives in the woods, on Sundays. It was a secular upbringing for myself, but there was a lot of church
Yeah.
activity around. Now that I'm in the system, I do realize that, I mean, we kind of take for granted that people are going to be decent with each other, and people are generally decent with each other. But of course, if you're in the program, then that's turned upside down.
You can't
now you're
be.
meeting people.
Right.
Yeah, now you're meeting people who are very hostile, and doing these things, that are scripted to degrade you, etc. And then you look in the military manuals, like Mark Rich did such a good job in his book New Revolutionary War, Revolutionary Methods of Political Control, and you see that this is all intentional, and they have comments in the military documents saying these people have to be rooted out. We have to cut out the entire organism. We have to deny them all access to public support systems. In other words, there's the presumption that the military controls the whole society, and now we have to make sure that that there's no more societal support for these threats, these potential threats, and anybody now that's put on the list is a potential threat by definition. So now what we do is it's like a modern day stoning, a ritualized stoning. Let's get the perception in the TI's mind that everybody's against them and is throwing rocks at them, so this is an attempt at creating a psychological breakdown so that you get a paranoia diagnosis. Everybody's against me.
Right.
Well, I mean, this is what so many TIs are going through. But the point is, it's in the military documents that they're doing this deliberately,
Right.
and how they're doing it. So my point is to TIs is, hey, the veil's coming down here, folks. We see what they're doing. We see that it's American tax dollars that are doing
Right.
this, and it's global, and it's unconscionable. And these are crimes, against humanity, and they're being carried out by individuals who are, making money. And many of these individuals work for the military. Many of these individuals are your local vigilante groups, or they're your county commissioners or whatever. But they're being enticed by some reward system to be part of the structure, which, according to this George Webb fellow, may be in fact just creating another command and control secret army that can be used to suppress any pushback from the people in the event of the complete lockdown of martial law, or maybe the food stops coming,
Right.
or whatever. I mean, the government has many, many levers of power, and has run every possible scenario for how to take a country down, and has been doing it around the world. George Webb keeps talking about the old adage that a CIA operative with 3 years and $10,000 can go and destroy a country by destabilizing it. They're like a virus. They'll go in and they'll compromise an individual, say a member of the church, film him or her, him usually doing something sexually inappropriate, and now you've got him. He's yours. This is what a case officer does. He corrupts, he contaminates an individual so that now he's under your control, and now it's with your organization, or you better do this with your country. And this is how the CIA spreads this corruption
Right.
and destabilization, and essentially divides and conquers with techniques that are proven, time honored,
Right. All the way back.
over and over again.
All the way back to the Jesuits. That's how the Jesuits would take over countries. They would come in and they would get the ear of the ruler, and then next thing they're in charge, or they have influence with the guy that's in charge. That's why they were thrown out of so many countries. Unfortunately, we don't have anywhere to throw these guys now.
Well, I do. I have a suggestion there, Paul. I think we ought
All
to
right.
give them the very vast and I'm sure resource-rich island of Antarctica. We'll give them all a cigarette lighter and a sleeping bag.
That's right.
And, a week's worth of rations and drop them off there, and
That's
say,
right.
hey, you guys sort it out. You guys can get your hierarchy down here and you can do your sacrifice, whatever you want to do. You got the whole place to yourself.
That's right. They can do their
And leave
rituals
us
till they
alone,
want.
by the way.
That's right. It's tough because they're all around and they're really good deceivers. Now, we're also working against the mainstream media. Now, the mainstream media is demonizing us. And first of all, they're subverting them with all these puppet shows, the Korean puppet show and the Trump puppet show and all this stuff that means nothing to anybody. But we're being demonized, the ones that are waking up and trying to give people some continuity of how they've rolled this thing out over the years. Here's what's happening to you. Don't fall for the social justice warrior thing. It's a psyop. They're trying to take your language away, and that's the one that we deal with most all when we're trying to deal with people even around our environment. To try to wake them up and get them to do what's really going on. It's hard because they've already been influenced by the mainstream. Here's how you think about this. Here's how you approach this. These people are lunatics.
Yeah, well, again, going back to the Vietnam syndrome, which you and I were obviously involved in, this was a time in America when, the American people, did actually eventually stop that war. Now, for those who are listening, the Vietnam War didn't start in 1964 when troops came on the ground as a result of this fraudulent Gulf of Tonkin non-incident. In which a small boat of Vietnamese attacked a great big American ship, but it didn't happen. But that was used then as a pretext for Lyndon B. Johnson to send all these troops and start the land war, which lasted 11 years, and then we left in disgrace in 75. But it actually started in the 51-52 era when the CIA were putting their advisors in, and the French were pulling out of their colony, Vietnam. And the United States empire, which was forming at that time, wanted all those resources. And then, of course, managed to partition Vietnam, just like Korea, into two, North and the South, and then get a fight going. And then, of course, the CIA would have these tried and true tactics. They would actually attack individuals of influence. And then when those individuals, stood up for themselves and didn't die, then they called those individuals insurgents. And now it's a counterinsurgency war. We've got to go after those insurgents who aren't doing our will. It's the same thing now with terrorism, counterterrorism, terrorism. It's the same thing. The counterterrorism, every federal agency has a counterterrorism unit now. Just about, I'm sure the Forest Service has a counterterrorism unit.
Absolutely.
And of course, all of these then have to be, coordinated. And it's all a big lie. It's all a huge lie. It's a gigantic house of cards.
Right.
And of course, they might not like somebody like me pointing out that it's a big lie, because can you imagine the amount of money that's being made on this industry, the national security establishment? Many, many, many billions. And of course, add that to the military industrial, you're talking trillions, probably, just off the top of my head, probably $20 trillion since 9/11, in which it's really ramped up, both for domestic and foreign programs. In other words, the wars abroad and the domestic military civil police state at home probably consumed something like $20 trillion when Americans are struggling.
Yeah. I think
and people are losing their homes in these contrived depressions,
right,
or recessions, whatever. And at what point are Americans going to wake up and say, no, this is not a good deal for us? We really don't want to conquer the world. What are we going to do with the world if we do conquer the world? And now we see that you guys are the ones who did 9/11. And so the global war on terror is, you're scaring. You know what your chances are of being killed by a terrorist, Paul? Statistically, one in 20 million, which is the same as being killed by your living room furniture.
Yeah.
So it's much less than being killed by a bee sting, or a shark or something like that, or a hurricane or a tornado or a lightning strike. In other words, it's a complete fraud. The whole war on terror, like the war on communism. So that's why I started the way I did. You got to have this perceived external threat. And now we've shifted from communism, and now it's terrorism, and it's a big, big, big money-making lie.
Yeah.
And people are being killed, squashed, countries are being destroyed in the name of this global war on terror. And all it is imperialism, empire, rich against the poor, theft of resources, human resources, people's lives, and of course natural resources, land,
Right.
Minerals, etc. So it goes back to those very basic things. And the people in the middle, the mercenary middlemen, are the soldiers, and they are the generals. Of course, they're high level. These are and of course, if you get into the interviews with Kay Griggs and things like that, talking about her ex-husband, who was Princeton, skull and bones type pedophile assassin for the top guys. I mean, these guys are really, really, really sick. And so at what point, do the American people, now going back to your question, I said we digressed. What about the 50s? Interesting point. What about the 50s? Would we have stood up if it had become clear that Satanism was going on? Would the country have stood up? I mean, those were the wholesome days of Leave It to Beaver,
Right, and men were men, and they would knock your block off, I mean, it was...
Right, yeah, a lot of fights in the street, and, and of course, this was a problem that they've been, trying to resolve in lots of different ways with their chemical industry and stuff like that. I think it might have been, but, again, this Satanism goes back thousands of years. So, you go back to the Salem witch trials. Apparently there's now, a Satanic center back in Salem, Massachusetts. I mean, this erupts through history.
Right.
Satanism. And so, therefore, it's really good to read some Catholic books, that talk about this perpetual war against the Satanists, and, ritual abuse and ritual killings and, satanic ritual abuse, etc., which includes killing children, again, offering to their God. So I have identified this historical trend in my websites, as Judeo-Masonic Satanism,
Yeah.
And it is a historical thing. And if you want to read about it, read Hugh Aiken's book, Synagogue Rising, or, there's a whole bunch of books that talk about the history of these things. The main threads do, the secret societies, etc., Rosicrucians, Masons, OTO, all these things kind of connect to, this black magic system, which
Right.
was taken out of Babylon and codified in, in the Jewish Kabbalah, which seems to be the black magic system that the Santeria cults of, South America use. There's an overlap, between the voodoo cultures, the cults
Sure.
of Haiti and whatnot. There's this, there's this satanic black magic thing going on. And that is the manipulation, the recreation, the reinvention of reality. Because God made reality. Satan doesn't like that. Satan wants a new reality. Satan doesn't like God's realities. He wants to overthrow it. He wants to, create a new reality. So, hey, if I say global warming's real, you have to believe it,
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's real or not, because, it's a matter of power.
Yeah.
And power is you do what I say, And so they'll take all these fables and these myths, like the 911 fraud and the global warming fraud, and so many other frauds, these operations, and they're not concerned about the truth. In fact, they live on lies. The substance of their lives is lies. And the whole war on terror is a big lie. And yet it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry in America. So how can you have a government and a civilization based on lies? I don't know. That's what we've got.
Yeah, I think that as you're saying this, and you're speaking truth the way I know it after having investigated. You're saying truth. And I think truth stands on its own. Lies need repeated and repeated, but truth stands on its own. And they always call it a counterinsurgency, which is really interesting because a counterinsurgency, it's counter to something. It has to be against something. So let's say the insurgency is the truth, and we're awakening to the truth, and we're starting to be really threatening to them. So if you look at it that way, and then you think of the vast resources, nothing else takes up this many resources as this counterinsurgency, to lock us down, to shut us up, to alienate us from everybody else, to divide and conquer. They're spending so much effort and time on a counterinsurgency. Our insurgency, which is the truth, has to be incredibly powerful. They have to be scared of it. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a very good definition of our situation. Now, Pete Seeger said something interesting, of course, the folk singer. Truth is like the grass. It keeps coming up through the cracks in the concrete, So they have the problem of the fact that, their edifice has got cracks in it and the grass keeps coming up. And they can't destroy the truth, although they keep trying to destroy the truth. And of course, Jesus did say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so there has been this historic effort to destroy Christianity. And notice it hasn't been successful. But certainly Christianity has been degraded by, manipulation and infiltration, etc. So that a lot of what's going on in the name of Christianity has nothing to do. I mean, you go to the Vatican. I mean, my God, the opulence there is phenomenal. I think Jesus wouldn't recognize the place, as having anything to do with what his life was about. But yeah, I mean, truth is reality. The Creator gave us a beautiful world, and the enemy, I guess, if you buy into that kind of basic biblical worldview, his job, he wants to take it over.
Yeah.
And I think that these armies, the Black Awakening that Russ Dizdar wrote about would be that Satan is preparing for the return of Jesus. I mean, the demons know that Jesus is real. The demons know that Jesus is the Lord. The demons know that Jesus is more powerful than they are, according to every source that I have read.
Right.
And, again, I was brought up in a secular Unitarian background, really. Which is, anything and everything and nothing, Satan is preparing his armies in hopes of winning when Jesus comes back. And, of course, it's predicted in the book of Revelations and elsewhere that won't happen. We've read, we know the end of the story, at least from the Bible's point of view. But the satanic forces are gearing up, it would appear, to win this war. And this is Russ Dizdar's point. With this satanic super soldiers, these will all be unleashed. And, of course, as you move into this age of robotics, Hitler said, World War II is about the Superman. What is the Superman? The Superman is these enhanced individuals, these satanically enhanced victims of satanic ritual abuse, who can then be the Manchurian candidates and the sex slaves and whatnot. The Jason Bournes, you might say, that are produced by this age-old process of ritual abuse, multiple personality creation, selection. The Illuminati is always selection. And the Illuminati is one of these secret societies at the top that has a plan for taking over the world, which was enunciated in their 1776 documents. They were found on May 1st, 1776. And going back to that calendar of yours, April 30th, coming up in a couple days, is Walpurgis Night, which is the day before May 1st. Yeah, this is a very, very important satanic holiday, perhaps the most important on the calendar. We need an old-fashioned witch burning here.
Yeah, I think we do. Well,
maybe in the 50s they would have done it. Certainly, we need to do it now.
That's right. Well, I think that what's happening, and this is just from my perspective, I think that Christianity is being purified by this, because how I'm seeing Christianity is the opposite of this. It's, what do they call it? A prophetic logic. What's the opposite of it? I'm seeing in Technicolor what Satan and the Satanists are presenting in their world. And by extrapolation, I can see what God is and what God represents and what his, and I can see that these are deceptions and this is truth. And to me, the falling by the wayside of a bunch of, there's so many, well, I think there's 38,000 Christian denominations, and I think that was 5 or 10 years ago I heard that. So everybody has a whole little different idea, and they're coming up, and they're infiltrated by Satanists. You know that most of them are somehow connected with somebody who, because Satan's not going to allow this stuff to run amok. He's not going to allow people to see the real truth. He's going to be infiltrated. So that's why it's fragmented so much. But I think the apparent all-encompassing influence of the satanic Luciferian force makes me see a Christianity or following my God in a lot more pure manner. I don't know whether this makes any sense, but it throws out a lot of these false doctrines that were riding on it. The first one is obviously Catholicism. That church was, well, the first thing it did, it changed its Sabbath to Sunday, which is what the old Babylon church would always follow. You worship on Sunday. That's the first thing it did in the 3rd century. So I think for me, it's a purification process, purifying my faith.
It certainly is confusing. I mean, I've been to Catholic churches, I've been to Orthodox, I've been to a number of Protestant, and of course they're all got the different spin. The Catholics have a long history, a written history, popes and everything.
Sure.
Many of whom were infiltrated, from the other side. But you read a book like Hugh Aiken's Synagogue Rising, and he's talking about the synagogue of Satan here, which Jesus predicted, which is really the top echelon of, well, he says they're Jews who say they are Jews and are not Jews.
Right.
Okay, so it's very confusing right there, Those who say they are Jews and are not Jews, but are the synagogue of Satan. That's Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9. He says it twice in the same book. He's saying that this is the beast system, the major dominant system in the end days. And he's identifying that system. And, whether the Catholic Church is, I don't think it's completely corrupt. If you read Hugh Aikens, who wrote Synagogue Rising, that there is the counter revolution of the Catholic Church against the forces that have been trying to destroy it all through its history. And he cites, it's a big fat book here, And then, of course, there's Dr. E. Michael Jones, English professor's long 1,200-page book, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, Its Impact on World History. And he's, again, talking about this 2,000-year battle between the Pharisaic Jews, who are now the Orthodox Jews, and the Catholic Church. And now there's a 1,200-page book with a lot of information in it,
Right.
So, again, you're talking about the young people not knowing what's going on in the 60s. Well, there's 2,000 years worth of, spiritual warfare going on here, which is intense. And it's documented for those who care to jump in and read about it. And I suggest it's a good idea to do that. But yes, it's not quite so simple as saying, and it's not so simple as saying you can't say all Jews are bad, but the Jewish leadership certainly does seem to be right smack dab center in this. The world's media is owned by, 95% is owned by 6 Jewish corporations, Jewish-owned corporations. So the propaganda system there, and then, you look at the revolving door between the military and the corporations, and, you guys got Michael Chertoff, who's founded DHS, and now he's, head of some big intelligence gathering. I mean, these guys are profiteering, and they're at the top of the system, the pyramid. And then there's the whole pedophilia thing. Well, you can't blame that on just one church because it's, it's rampant.
What I was saying is, for all of us, whether we're Jews or Catholics or Protestants or even Muslims, what we're seeing is we're seeing Satan, and we're either accepting that system or going away from that system. And it's a filtering process. And it doesn't matter whether you call yourself Catholics, because I know some Catholics that are exemplar people. I have 4 Jewish children that are wonderful guys. And it's not the label. It's the rejection of the satanic system that's constantly sucking them in. And I see the sucking of the satanic system as being a purification for whatever you call yourself, a Muslim, a Christian, or whatever, because you're seeing the other side, you're seeing the truth, whereas that system is showing the falsity. It's like a real hard-edged dichotomy that's now taking place, and it's becoming more and more vivid. As you wake up, it's like, oh my God, I can see it so clearly now. I know the way I need to go. And people, they can have a choice, I suppose. No, but I'm not saying that. I think that what I know of the history of the Roman Catholic Church, it was kind of put together by Constantine. And Constantine, in order to be I think a great, powerful leader back in the day, I think you had to follow the Church of Babylon in order to get into that position so that you could assimilate Christianity that was growing by leaps and bounds, I guess, and assimilate and make it your state religion. I don't know, but I know that for me, my faith is becoming more and more clear as I look at what's going on in the world in Satanism. I guess that's what I wanted to say.
I think that's an excellent point. I came across the idea recently, to understand good, you first have to understand evil first.
Yeah.
And this is what you and I have done. I mean, we've looked at the evil, and now we can see the importance of the good. I mean, because the evil is so dark, and it's consuming so many people, and is damaging so many people, deliberately so, that we have to stand up against it somehow. And of course, that also involves an examination of your own life and conscience, etc. I guess the characteristic of a psychopath is someone without a conscience, and maybe roughly 4% of the population would be almost like a different species in that sense. I mean, they don't have they're not wired the same way. They have no conscience. And so this whole aspect of Satanism, I do believe you're right. It's very important. It's very central to all of this. I do believe the gang stalking system is satanic.
Absolutely,
it's a satanic system. It's run from the top Illuminati satanic families, and then there's this gigantic hierarchy right down to the street level perps who could just be a poor guy who needs some money, but maybe he's kind of compromised on this, or maybe he's the police are going to let him off this if he does that, the same kind of deal making, etc. But the deeply satanic nature of gang stalking is striking, and I think Satanism, or the satanic nature of it, is a fundamental component of it. And a lot of TIs will talk about that. That they're being assaulted by. It's almost like satanic oppression.
Right.
It's like you are deliberately put in a system where you are satanically oppressed. And, maybe they're just, taking people who are currently not scripted to go to hell and make sure that they go to hell. Maybe it's almost as simple as that. It's like, okay, let's get more recruits for our religion, which is, Satanism.
Yeah. The question for me is this all orchestrated from the top with the help or the overseeing of God, or is it actually the way that Christians describe it as a battle between good and evil? I have trouble with that one, because I think God's all powerful, omnipotent, and all present, and so if this is happening as a war against him, there has to be a force that matches him, and I don't think there is a force that matches him. So he has to be somehow involved orchestrating this, And what I see is you and I, we're playing our part to try to wake people up to what's going on, to characterize it in a way that they can see. Now, there's some people, I guess, that are not going to be able to escape it. Let's say you're a petty criminal and they let you off if you become a gang stalker, and now you're stuck in a satanic system. Or you're somebody like Britney Spears or Miley Cyrus, who was sold into this system when they're very young. You know, I don't think there's much we can do to help them now. But I think it's our job to keep coming out with the information, showing them a different way, trying to get them to see the difference between the insurgency and the counterinsurgency that's trying to be, I don't know what it's, recruiting or corrupt. That's still, the jury's out for me on that one. But
I really like your equating truth and truth-seeking with the insurgency. I remember a 911 conference that I went to in San Francisco where a young man got up there and said, you know, truth is my religion. Truth is my God. And I thought, well, right on, you know, good on you. You know, that's great.
right.
You know, that's a pretty darn good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, a young guy like that, you know, he's going to be under a lot of pressure from the other side, isn't he?
Yeah.
To knuckle under or to cave in or to be tempted here or there or to somehow be drawn into that system. So this apparently is the world we live in. You know, it's this battle. Now, when I'm going through my day, I often say, well, you know, take it easy, God's in control. You know.
Yeah.
And in other words, He is the the creator. He is the but I'm with you in that there's much I don't understand. I mean, Jesus supposedly came in order to destroy the works of the devil, and apparently he did, but the devil's works are now everywhere.
Yeah.
And so apparently there's no contest between Jesus and the devil, and yet from where we sit and where we stand and as we go through our day, it would look like the devil's doing pretty darn well.
Yeah.
And has a lot of power. So it is confusing in that sense, and I have no.
Right. Well, they're trying to
I have
get
no solution for that.
they're trying to get a lot of power, and they need money, and they need people, and they need a lot. We don't need any of that. All we need is the truth. Let me get back to your guy that said his religion is truth. His biggest problem with that doctrine of truth is your own ego. Because in my study of egos, and that's kind of my field, your ego has no value for truth. Your ego has value for self-worth and being right. And so to let go of your beliefs and go on truth, wow, that's really something that takes work every day, all day, because the minute you say something or you have an opinion, wow, how invested am I in that opinion? Can I let that opinion go in a heartbeat if it was shown to me to be wrong? That's the problem we're having right now, because the ego just doesn't value truth. And we have to train the ego to value truth above everything, to be part of the insurgency, to be part of the awakening. So that's a real dilemma that we all have. A couple months ago, you know, I told everybody don't vote because I knew Trump was a fraud and that whole thing was just a puppet show. But then Trump starts saying all the right things. And the first 20 or 30 days in office, he's actually doing stuff. So I might have said to somebody, you know, I might be a Trump supporter. And somebody who I knew for a long time says, well, no, he's just a fraud. You know it. You've talked about it. And I did. But then to go back and watch his first 100 days where he's come back on all of his promises and everything, I know he's a fraud for sure now. It's hard for my ego to say to that person, you know, you were right. I was wrong even biting on that apple one time. And it's hard for me, even though I've God, I've got a PhD in ego, studying the ego, and I know it gets you. It's a hard thing to follow truth. But I want to, anybody that's listening to this, it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. And this is what Dr. Karlstrom does all the time. That's why his head's in books all the time. And he's able to remember this stuff and regurgitate this to help us try to follow truth. And I'm sure he would be the first to admit if he was wrong on something. Or not. You know, it's hard for all of us.
Well, yeah, going back to this issue of gang stalking, so-called, again, the term organized stalking or whatever you want to call it, fourth generation warfare, unconventional warfare. We are discovering as, we're investigating and my background as a researcher, academic, is a process. You go and get information and then you assemble it and you see what the patterns are. So, it's a little objective. It's pretty objective. But there's certainly, I'm going to make a mistake along the way and, maybe go too far this way or go too far that way. As you say, it really is incumbent on the researcher to admit where he or she, is wrong, or at least back off that position.
Right.
It's like okay, that's a avenue that didn't go anywhere. So, but I will say, that I think that on my 5 websites now we finally get this in now. My 5 websites are 911nwo.com. It's all about the New World Order and 9/11 as being a false flag, a synthetic state-sponsored terror event in service of the New World Order. I think I was right on that. I've got another website on naturalclimatechange.org and .us, in which I pretty much, I think, document pretty well that the man-caused global warming meme is a hoax and designed, to be the center point of a false environmental movement, which is designed to bring in this UN Agenda 21, which is another world for the New World Order. Uh-huh. Control of the resources by the people at the top. And I think I was right on that too. And actually, this goes into my actual field of research in my career as a physical geography professor. I've got another website now on gang stalking, mind control, cults.com. Got an enormous amount of information. These are all digital libraries of information for people that want it. And, I just consider my role as an educator to keep doing what I'm doing. I've got a decent retirement from my university 30-year career. So I'm a teacher,
Right.
And a teacher teaches.
Me too.
And so, no big deal. It's what you do. It's what you're trained for. It's what your life is about.
But what I was saying was, when you can say I was wrong, that way you can, and you said yourself that at one point they had convinced you that global warming was an actual fact until you did your research and you were wrong and you
That's right.
published your stuff. Now, deeply researched stuff like Dr. Carlson has on his website, you can take it to the bank. He's in the process of publishing the truth. Now, if you go in there and you're not on the same page as he is, he's going to teach you through this website, through highly documented research, how he came to his truth, which I think is the truth. So I'm not saying that you have to go around making mistakes all the time. But what I'm saying is, if you're bent on the truth and you do the research, you're going to find the truth. And
I totally agree with that. I think the truth is out there to be discovered. But of course, we live now in a network of lies that the government puts out. And, people who go to university and take, a major in political science, they learn Machiavelli. And, Machiavelli is this Italian, writer who wrote The Prince. And he's advising the prince back in the 1500s or whatever, 1600s. You divide and conquer, might makes right, the ends justify the means, and you have to lie to the people in order to control them.
Right.
And people would much rather have a, attractive lie than a hard truth. Well, you and I are in the business of a hard truth,
Yeah.
Because people can protect themselves and, what they have, their loved ones, etc., with the truth. If they've been sucked into these lies, they're completely looking in the wrong direction. They're easily manipulated, they're easily duped and fooled and used as useful idiots. So the truth then is like solid gold in terms of a war situation. Well, we have a war situation.
Right.
Gang stalking is a war situation. You're in a war, and you don't know at first who's waging it against you or why.
Exactly.
You have no clue. All you know is all of a sudden your world is totally upside down. You might be out on the street. You've lost your job. One of the things that George Webb mentions in his interview that we talked about is that half the Fortune 500 corporations are contributing to fusion centers, and one of the reasons, or main reason, would be if they have an employee they don't like, they just put them on the list.
Yeah,
you don't even have to fire anybody. You don't have to fire them. You just put them on the list and watch their life go to shit. Excuse my language.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden they've lost their job, they've lost their home, they're out on the street, and they've committed suicide.
Right.
So, this is a dangerous, sinister, evil program, and yet Fortune 500 corporations, or at least half of them, are financially supporting it. So, the tentacles of this thing go deep, deep, deep into the power structure.
Exactly. And I also think that nuggets of truth, like the ones found on your website, help you navigate this deception. If you know certain things are true, and they're fooling you with something else, to question that heartily, because it doesn't conform with something that you know to be the truth. So finding the truth and knowing the truth is the only way to get through this maze. It's the only way to formulate the insurgency, is knowing.
Yeah, which is why you go back to, Winston Smith on the table and O'Brien with the electrodes and, what's 2 and 2? And he says 4, bzzz, what's 2 and 2? 4, bzzz, so they hate the truth. They want your mind to be flexible and accept different truths that are false. And this now makes you a double-minded person, just like the book of James talks about it. A double-minded person is unstable in all his ways. And from an individual point of view and as a citizen's point of view, we need the truth. From the point of view of the power elite, the opposite side of this war, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state, according to Joseph Goebbels, head of the Ministry of Propaganda in Nazi Germany. Truth is the greatest enemy of the state. So the state is coming down very, very hard on the truth. State media complex, industrial military complex, coming down very, very hard on the truth. And I happen to believe God's in control. God's in control. And
I think so too.
That the truth will win, But we've got a bumpy road going right now.
Yeah, it looks like everything's against us. But I think if we just ground ourselves in knowing that we're finding the truth, and even certain people that I've known that have been rudely awakened by these things or being involved in this TI program, the benefit is you can no longer live in the BS world that they've created for us, because it's not comfortable anymore. You've got to look, you've got to find, why are they doing this to me? What's happening? And I think some good's coming out of these horrible, torturous things that people are going through.
I tell you, an image that goes through my mind that is very bothersome. I see this image that we've seen on TV and in the documentaries of the, square-jawed Marine sergeant, or who knows, maybe he's working for Halliburton or Blackwater or something. And he's at Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, a torture center, a detention center, where they rounded up these goat herders from Saudi Arabia, obviously who had nothing to do with 9/11. And then they put them in, confined, solitary confinement. Basically what they're doing is driving them crazy slowly through torture. And then this square-jawed Marine is walking the guy, the goat herder around. The guy's got his wrists tied together and maybe his feet are slightly shackled, and he's shuffling along. And this is how we're paying our soldiers, to torture these goat herders from Saudi Arabia. I mean, this is so, and then we watch it on TV.
Right.
And of course, this has a chilling effect. This is what's called implicit terror. We have explicit terror and implicit terror. And the implicit terror is, hey, this could be you, you know.
Exactly.
And
I think as long as we allow this Guantanamo Bay to exist, it shows us, for our internal selves and the whole world, what we're about. We're about torture. And in Guantanamo Bay, I've never heard anything about them interrogating, torturing for information gathering. They do it for 10 years, for heaven's sakes. Don't you think that if someone knew something and they were going to be broken by terror, don't you think it would happen in 10 years or 20 years? I don't know how long it's been. I guess probably 2003. It's probably 15 years by now. But that's an American shame. As an American, I can say that, and a worldwide disgrace that we allow that to continue. Allow our tax dollars to go to supporting that. We do that as a people, as a culture. We do that. We dress them up in orange jumpsuits, which is the satanic color, and we have them kneel. And if they want to starve themselves to death, we put a tube down through their nose and feed them. I mean, it's shameful for us. It's shameful for what we call the free world. And I think if you wanted to do something and you're out there just looking for something to do, work on them to get that shut down. Because I think if we could get that shut down, that's the first step in getting probably the other 500 that are set up worldwide doing the same thing to be shut down. We need to turn our back on that kind of behavior. We can't do that anymore. Anyway.
And by extrapolation, we as a nation are behind this global gang stalking program,
yes,
which is the Global Phoenix program, which is a no-touch torture system that targets individuals deliberately, and that is a military word, target, who have been put on a list for whatever reason, and there's no review of that list. The people are not given an opportunity to hear their charges. So we're going back to pre-Magna Carta days. There is no legal. It's an extrajudicial process entirely, and then it's no-touch torture unto death for these individuals. So this is not that different from what's going on in Gitmo. This is our nation, the shame of our nation and our military and our populace through this civil military operations involved in doing the same thing. Now, of course, what's going on another level is that the military or the power structure is identifying enemies so that the country can unite against these common enemies, you see. The enemies are everywhere. They're here, they're over in Iraq, they're in Afghanistan, they're in America. They're the terrorists, you know. I'm the terrorist for,
right,
for investigating the truth now.
Yeah.
And now we'll get the people in my community in, say, Karlstrom, Colorado, to play roles to harass me or whatever. And that, to me, is a shame that's, every bit as shameful as
right,
Guantanamo Bay. I really equate the two systems. These are both torture systems.
Exactly. We have to realize that as Americans, what we're about, the most dominant thing, torture. That's what we do. And we do it because we have satanic masters. We torture our own citizens. We torture foreign people. The Phoenix program, do you have a reference on the Phoenix program? Because that was incredibly horrible. They did horrible things over there to the Vietnamese people. And,
yes, Douglas Valentine, who is of our generation, wrote a book called The Phoenix Program, which is really the definitive book on it. And he also has a book called The CIA as Organized Crime, How Covert Operations Corrupt America and the World, which just came out this year, in which he's got a chapter about the Phoenix Program. And that became then the template for what's going on now with the gang stalking program. This is a global Phoenix program. This is a bounty hunting program.
Right.
And the CIA, we've got CIA, ex-CIA people saying, hey, we've devolved into a bounty hunting program. We're going after people.
Right.
And there is no recourse on the part of the person to defend themselves in a court of law, saying, hey, what did I do? I haven't broken any laws.
That's right.
But that doesn't matter. We've moved beyond that. It's just like George Orwell. We're going to get the guy on the table that is acting out in some way. It doesn't have to be defined. We don't like him. We're going to change this person's behavior and this person's mind. So in a way, you can look at this as a concealed population control, perception management. We're going to take the potential bad apples, the ones who could, spread the virus of truth or whatever, and we're going to neutralize them.
Right.
So this system is so corrupt and so evil that it's hard to believe we're not in the last days. I mean, this is an extraordinarily evil system.
It really is. But they're fighting against something that's must be very, very powerful, because they're pulling out all the stops. So this truth, this insurgency, we must be something. I think we are something. I think we're divine beings, and I think we're made in the image, and I think we are very powerful. And it'd be cool if we could work our way out of this. And the best way.
Thank you. And I think what we're doing is, we're doing our best, which, that's what we can do. We can do our best. And it gives us opportunities to learn and to grow and to share what we know and to hopefully teach others some, and to help others some. I get, like you, I get many emails, I have phone calls, I get letters from people claiming to be TIs, many of whom I think are very legitimate, and some of whom I'm not so sure about.
Right.
Because obviously this is a program that's huge, and there will be lots of trolls and impersonators and actors playing all parts to deceive. But there's no doubt in my mind that, and my suspicion is that there are millions of people in this program. And in this show, we talked about the possibility that in addition to the no-touch torture going on with this program, that there is actually a secret CIA standing army that is being trained in this process. We really have to come to grips with thinking about what that might be for, and maybe we can talk about that in a future.
Yeah, we need to do that. I also think there's a secret army being programmed by television that could be triggered at any time to do who God knows what. I know that they really don't appreciate my opinions because they differ from the CNN's opinion or MSNBC's opinion. And so, but I'm the bad guy because I'm trying to get people to come out of that programming trance. So this has been just an incredibly invigorating thing for me. It always is. You're always so inspiring and knowledgeable, and I don't know how you can keep all these books in your head. You just have a special talent, and a special talent for research. That's why you're being on The World Beyond Belief as often as you can is really important, because you speak at a high level, your research is flawless, and you do speak the truth, and that's what we need to get out. Why don't you go ahead. Why don't you sum up and give your websites again, and we can end this.
Okay, Paula. Yeah, I think it has been a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And as we continue, we're learning, we're teaching each other, we're learning from others, and is extremely important. I think what you're doing, what we're doing. My battery's going down here, so I better talk fast now. Our websites are 911nwo.com, gang stalking, mind control cults.com, naturalclimatechange.org, San Luis Valley waterwatch.com, where I live in the San Luis Valley of Colorado, and also my musical website, the only one that I'm selling anything on, which is my music, my CDs, is erickarlstrom.com. The rest of this stuff is free for the taking. Once in a while, I respond to people who give me feedback, which I appreciate. In fact, that's how indeed I met Paul and Mindy Marco here from response to one of my websites.
Right.
But I'm not very good about going there because I'm busy researching. It's like my attitude is keep going forward, and God will sort it out, you know. But anyway, I sure appreciate this interview with you, Paul and Mindy, and your efforts. And I'm looking forward, as soon as I can get set up, to getting on some of your four-way interviews.
They'd love it. They'd love it. They're looking forward to you joining them. And hey, I've listened to Eric's music. It's delightful. It's kind of, I'd characterize it a combination between classic and country. It's very sophisticated. It's like a very sophisticated country music. Very refreshing. So with that, we'll say thank you very much, Dr. Eric Karlstrom. It's been a pleasure. And I'll say thank you to the World Beyond Belief audience. Bye-bye.